Hello, and welcome to my celestial perch. Today I have another build for you, a basic build again. This one is more focused on beginning players, players that are either entirely new to Stellaris or relatively new to Stellaris, and are looking for something that would be relatively easy to pick up and start. And that's kind of what I designed this around. After playing with some of my friends, after teaching several people Stellaris, Um, a lot of them get overwhelmed and just bombarded with decisions. So, what I've done is I've created a very basic guide that you can just copy, and it will reduce the amount of decisions you have to make. Meanwhile, it will just kind of overall improve your economy and improve your early game experience in Stellaris. So, let's begin, and we'll work our way down, starting from the top. Obviously, I've chosen a holy avian and randomized the species name and just chosen the avian name 1. For traits, I've chosen some stuff that will just assist you and won't really require too much knowledge or kind of working around. It's not going to be meta, but in a general sense, the people that will be using these builds, a meta build versus an off meta build won't really impact how well they end up doing. At that point in the game, it's purely game knowledge. So the point of this build is to just reduce the amount of decisions you have to make on your empire, because considering anomalies, other empires, war, everything else that goes on, the more we can keep it simple, the better. So rapid breeders, by adding in additional pops, you just have more to work with, and over the course of the game, it will net you additional population that can work jobs, and just in general, that's helpful. Charismatic, the next positive trait. I've noticed a lot of new players in Stellaris don't build enough amenity buildings or don't distribute luxury resources, and their amenities suffer, and then their stability suffers. So charismatic will eke out just a little bit more from all of your amenity producing jobs. And lastly, strong is in no way a good pick or a meta pick for a top tier player, but for a regular player, the extra worker pop resource output will just give them a little bit more to work with, and that's fine. Unruly, I would encourage any new player to pick this, or any experienced player as well. It's basically a free 2 points. The empire size from pops is negligible. And the other negative one perk that you can pick is sedentary, or any of the other ones that have little to no impact. So stuff like solitary, deviance to some degree, wasteful is a bit hard. But I prefer sedentary, as pop growth from immigration is basically not noticeable anyways, and most new players probably won't know how to resettle pops. So picking sedentary is probably fine. Next, let's go into our planets. For this, not a huge deal. For a new player, pick whatever you really want. I like arid, extra energy, and generator districts. Pretty solid. You can also change, as I mentioned before in my previous video, to the Deneb system or the Sol system. These all have guaranteed size 20 homeworlds, which is pretty nice. City appearance doesn't really matter. Origin. This one's pretty big for a true new player, someone who might not have any experience in Stellaris, or for that matter, any Paradox game. Both Prosperous Unification or Scion are both really good. Prosperous Unification just gives you additional pops to work with, 2 extra districts, and a small little buff to your capital world for, I believe it's 20 years. You don't have to do anything, it just gives you benefits, and that's great. The other one is Scion, which you start as the vassal of a fallen empire. It may sound kind of complex, but actually, it's very, very simple. If you're behind the AI in any way, or just you're behind, the Scion, your fallen empire vassal, will give you stuff for free. You don't have to do anything. So both of these are great picks. I wouldn't recommend taking really anything else. They're either just not very helpful or actively hard to deal with. So I would recommend Scion or Prosperous Unification. Those are both great. Now, moving on to probably the most important part, are government and ethics. For ethics, start here, I've chosen authoritarian simply because it reduces the amount of consumer goods we have to worry about by starting with stratified economy living standards. We cannot use democratic government forms, but I'll go over why those are terrible in a moment anyways. And the active empire modifiers of additional influence, which will help the new player expand, and worker pop resource output, which will give us more food, minerals, and energy. Pairs quite nicely with strong as well, as I mentioned before, just to give the new player additional input so that then they don't dry up on that too quickly. Input being your energy, food, and minerals, which are used to create your kind of like output, which could be considered like consumer goods, research, alloys. So those are generally more important for new players, just because if you don't build enough of them, then you can't really get the high quality output that you need. Next is Xenophile. Xenophile is good, I think, for new players, just because you have increased opinion for other species, meaning that empires are more likely to like you. Um, you have a few other modifiers that don't really matter too much, and then the other important ones are extra trade value, which for most empires, most organic empires that are not mega corporations, just equates to additional energy, which is fine. And available envoys, which will help you send those to other empires that maybe you can ally, form defensive pacts with, or at least keep them at bay for a lot longer. And lastly, materialist. Having extra research speed is great, and robot upkeep is fine. If you happen to build robots or go down that path, it's great to have. Next, let's move to authority. As I mentioned before, we don't use democratic simply because it's too much work. Every 10 years, you have to select a new ruler, and you have to do mandates. I'm not going to get too deep into mandates and elections and the unity gain from that. It's just not worth it. I would recommend for any new player any of these three, but really and truly, Imperial is the easiest, as you get a ruler for life. Same thing with dictatorial. Only difference is that when this ruler dies, you have a designated successor. So you don't even have to choose an election, don't have to elect your next emperor or king. You just have your ruler set aside for you, so the new player will see the pop-up, oh, my leader has died, and boom, you have a new leader. Nothing to worry about. Moving on to civics. Before I move on to civics, the max influence from power projection, these little small empire modifier effects will more than likely have little to no impact. So I was just going with something that makes it easier for the new player to kind of manage the game. But moving on to civics, diplomatic cores is great for new players. The available envoys mean that if you have a neighbor that normally might be aggressive, maybe a hegemonic imperialist or just someone who's more militarist in nature, you can send 2, 3, even more envoys to them and attempt to stack the improved relations effect, so that then over the course of maybe 5 years, you'll be a lot better off in terms of their opinion of you, and you might be able to get defensive pacts with powerful empires, research agreements, just other things that would kind of help you out throughout the game rather than being attacked. The diplomatic weight for a new player, not as important, but still could be useful if you're playing around with the galactic community. And lastly, police state. I've noticed before, as I mentioned with the amenities, new players might not be able to manage their planets as effectively. This kind of just keeps you going for just a bit longer. The extra stability is great, keeping you above that threshold for negative modifiers, where staying in high stability is generally sought after. So having a civic that you don't have to do anything with, you just simply get extra stability, as well as some small unity, is quite nice. There are obviously a few other civics you could pick. I'm not going to go over too many of them, just that for new players, things like maybe mining guilds, functional architecture, um, efficient bureaucracy is kind of bad, but just things that you don't actually have to manage or do anything with or take advantage of. They are just passive benefits. Those are what I recommend. Diplomatic cores, I understand, is not as passive as some of the others. you still have to send the envoys, but it's a very basic thing to understand, and once you get a hold of it, it will help you throughout your playstyle. Moving forward, advisor voice, empire name, flag, ship appearance, and ruler all really don't matter too much. The last thing I can mention is just that, keep the game and the galaxy size relatively small. Obviously, don't play on Grand Admiral. Start with Ensign or Cadet. Those will make the game a lot more manageable. And keep most of the default options. Just as I mentioned before, only thing I would recommend changing is turn Caravaneers, L-Gates, and Xeno compatibility off. It will not only improve performance, but also with Caravaneers gone, just fewer pop-ups and fewer things to keep track of. But thank you for listening. This has been the second build in the basic build guides, more catering towards new players, and just giving you a basic civilization that will be overall easy to use. You can either just copy this or rewatch the video and see what I picked. But aside from that, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to leave a comment or email me directly. But thank you. Have a nice day.